You're listening to She Speaks, a Let Her Speak podcast that celebrates women's fearlessness, resiliency, and readiness to change the world. All right.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Erika Biddix. I am the founder and owner of Aught and also Biddix Meetings and Events. I'm a connector. And if I had to describe the last 2 years, I would use the word rollercoaster.
And I am pretty sure that I know exactly why. So we heard all about, a couple years ago, Girl Boss Offices.
Yes.
At the time.
GBO. Good old GBO.
Good old GBO. Rest in peace.
Yep.
And that was only a few months after you had opened.
Right.
Actually, when we talked last, at least did that interview. Obviously, you and I have talked a lot more since then. But so for everybody listening, let's talk about what all unfolded.
What happened
after
from then?
middle of 2020.
Middle of 2020. So we, just to backtrack a little bit, we opened our doors in December of 19, as we discussed in the previous episode. And then obviously the world, as we knew it, fell apart in March. And then I think we did that interview in like September or October, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my personal life at that time was very difficult. My father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I was driving back and forth to Indianapolis kind of constantly. And that's the space I was in when we did that interview. And I say all of that because his illness was such hand-in-hand a part of the story of what was happening at Girl Boss Offices. He has been an entrepreneur my entire life, was an important part of me stepping into my own entrepreneurship journey with Biddix Meetings, and thought I was crazy when I opened GBO, but had been really supportive. But his illness happened at almost the exact same time that the idea for GBO happened. So those stories intertwine. Shortly after we filmed that episode, he did lose his battle with cancer. And within the same month, I received a cease and desist letter from some real friendly people who own the hashtag Girl Boss. So honestly, I could have fought it in court. We probably maybe would have won, but it was going to take a tremendous amount of time and money, neither of which I had in abundance, not to mention the emotional state I was in. It really and truly, I came home from Indianapolis after his funeral, checked the mail, got the letter, just sat and cried and thought, well, that was fun. That was a fun ride, but I'm going to be done. I'm going to be done for now. So I reached out to good old business fairy godmother Booth. I was like, this is happening. Bless Booth, because she kind of, how is that making you feel? What are your thoughts?
Classic Booth questions.
I was with somebody the other day and we were talking about how she has a deck of difficult questions. And so you just tell her something totally random and then she just pulls one of those out on you, right? So, and she knew from immediately that I was not in a place to make any sort of decision. And if I did, that it would be an in the moment kind of decision. So she checked in on me and kind of let me marinate a while. And it took me about 2 weeks. And about 2 weeks afterwards, I just kind of had a moment where, and to be frank, I kind of felt God talk to me. And he was like, look, you can either keep what you love, the GBO, the logo, the color, because that's where my head was going to. I had named that business so specifically to say what it was, because businesses that you don't know what they are when you read their name drive me crazy. That's irony there for you. So really, I just wanted that logo. And if I was going to rename, I wanted it to be the initials GBO. And I wanted, there were just so many things I really wanted, and they had told me I could keep it if I had just the one office, didn't expand the brand, didn't try to do retreats, etc. So basically what I was told was you can either keep it and stay small, or you can recognize that what you have developed at GBO was meant to be much bigger, and you can give up the branding and allow her to kind of flourish. So really and truly, it was a moment of, we had unintentionally put a ceiling on what Girl Boss Offices could be with that name alone, and taking that name away allowed us to just let her step into her next kind of, place. Haley Sprinkle always says that was like maybe the high school version, and then she went to college, and even with some of the changes we have made since then, I feel like then she stepped into her professional career, kind of past college. So that was where we were. Was great. Now we got to rename. We got to rename this thing. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So that was fun too. All of a sudden, now I had to rename a company, and I had to rename a company in a way that I knew could be trademarked, because the loss of being able to use not only that name, but of not having a trademark meant that my franchise capability was going to be severely restricted, right? So lots of conversations with the lawyers. And actually who I was working with legally was the legal clinic at the University of Tennessee. They had taken on Girl Boss offices as their quote unquote client for the semester, not knowing that this was what we were going to deal with. So that was really interesting. They did a lot of research for me on how to have a name that is trademarkable. And I think that is a piece that was so far removed from anything I had learned in my entrepreneurship journey. And it's I feel bad when I burst other people's bubbles with some of that information, but boy, howdy, would that have been useful ahead of time, right? So one of the things is that trademarks are self-policed. There is not a trademark bureau out there checking to see if people are using other people's trademarks. So the folks who have the hashtag Girl Boss, if you kind of look at their booth, is going to be like, you should not tell all this, but it's fine because we're not in a lawsuit. If you kind of look at the trademark USPTO site, it's obvious that they do this often, that they go and they, play the big corporation card, and then they're absorbing all of these
We
others.
should also mention that Girl Boss is owned by a man.
Correct.
Yes.
So hashtag Girl Boss was started by a woman. It was then sold to a male-owned company, which was then sold to another male-owned company. So I like to say it was a bunch of rich dudes in Hollywood. And I wasn't
pretty
gonna
much.
fight. Yeah. And I just wasn't up for fighting that. So anywho, we just went through all this. How can you trademark something? You can't. You can trademark your name, but it's very difficult. So Erika Biddix, there probably are not another one in the world, but trademarking it would be very hard. Saying female entrepreneur offices is too much of a what it is to trademark it. So they said my options were to come up with make up a word, or maybe to look at archaic words. So I tried to make up a word, like Pepsi and I think Adidas, Atari. Those are all words that are just made up. My brain does not work like that. I used a word generator over and over and over again. I asked my kids to make up words, and my brain just could not see them as words because they weren't. So I went to the archaic list on the old Google, and 4 or 5 of them I thought sounded good, so I wrote them on a big whiteboard. And I actually have that picture that I really need to share on social. I've been meaning to do that for a while. And I looked up kind of the meanings of the words, and the 4 or 5 of them looked good, sounded good, and the meaning could I could maybe make it work. But Aught was the first one on the list, AUGHT. And in the dictionary, it's 2 different definitions because technically it means nothing. But it could be anything, it can be at all, and then there's another definition underneath there. But we kind of looked at it. We saw it as one definition, anything at all. Realized it was not one definition. Went through a whole bunch more talking and decided that we could do that. We could just redefine it. And the more we talked about it, Haley and I had one particular day that I have on video where we both just got such goosebumps. We were like, oh my God, we're not only redefining a word, we're redefining entrepreneurship. And so that was how the naming happened. And then we had the hurdle of trying to relaunch a brand that had limited, word of mouth recognition because we had been so new. And we were trying to launch it with a word that nobody knew what it meant. And that brought us to about middle of 2021.
Yeah. So let's backpedal a little bit, because just the fact that you were going through 2 extremely traumatic moments in your life. So you have your personal life and you have your professional life. And I could definitely see most people being like, I can't do this anymore. I just need to stop, and I'll recollect, and maybe a couple months, maybe a year, maybe a few years down the road, maybe I'll try this
Yeah.
again. What helped you to persevere through all of that and keep going?
Yeah, that's funny because as you're asking me the question, I'm thinking answers like, I just like to be mean to myself, or that kind of stuff, which are condescending answers to myself, right? Because the reality of it is, I'm a person who does not like to fail and does not like to let others fail, right? So a lot of what I do has been helping women get to the headspace to understand that they are worthy of success and that they're able, and willing, if they're willing, that they have that ability to be successful. And I think it was a good dose of that mixed with, I'm not a quitter, so I wasn't going to quit. I was not going to let the dudes in Hollywood win. But the biggest piece of it was that I'm gonna use Aught from now on. Aught had become such her own person, and we had seen such potential in her, and we had seen the impact that she was making already, that the thought of letting that go was that would have been more traumatic to let that go. And I will say we're, a little over 2 years in now. I'm sure we'll talk about kind of where she stands currently. We are still bootstrapping, right? Like my husband and I are still putting money into the business. And on days where I feel like it's just not, that's always going to be the case. And, there's just down days. Is this ever going to be fiscally successful? Where is it? And my husband will look at me and say, we're not letting this fail. We're not. It means too much to other people, to the city, and it means too much to you. And I don't want her to fail. I want to support her in all the ways that she can be right now. Yeah.
And I think a third piece, though, that we haven't really talked about, which was also a very traumatic episode, is the other side of you and the events.
Yeah.
And just all of those things.
So that was happening
happened.
too. So I own 2 businesses because why not? I can give you a list of why not, but so Biddix meetings, the day, in March 16th, 15th or 16th, I think was when it really just became a reality in the meetings and events industry. I lost literally everything with Biddix meetings. Every single client pulled out, every trade show canceled, every event canceled, every contract I had canceled, just like everybody else in my industry. There are so many industries that were hit so hard, but the hospitality industry really took it in a whole other way, because there was it just was gone overnight. And I kind of looked at that a little bit as a silver lining, because it allowed me the brain space to focus on Aught's growth. Biddix meetings, I've been doing that for so long that it really is fairly automated at that point. It was terrifying from an income standpoint. I spent a good deal of 2020 and 2021 drawing unemployment because I don't take a paycheck from Aught yet. And I had no paycheck coming from Biddix meetings. But in addition to having lost my own personal business, my entire network was also going through it. And that had happened 2 weeks after the tornadoes hit in Nashville, which I was already trying to support that professional network, most of which is located in Nashville. So man alive, it is a good thing I can compartmentalize, because otherwise I would have just been a puddle on the floor. The good news is I can compartmentalize. The bad news is I literally work with my therapist on being able to cry because I just don't have that capability. My body shuts down so much. But yeah, Biddix meetings was kind of a goner. And then I thought, you know what? I think maybe I should just shut it down. And I was really at that space. I met with a woman here locally, Holly Holloway. She's another event and meeting planner, just to say, what do I do? We didn't even know each other. We had met at a Let Her Speak event, and then subsequently a We event. And I just needed somebody else to chat to about the business. So I went from that day saying, I think I'm going to just close Biddix meetings down, which was not a reality because Biddix meetings fills the bank account and then Aught fills the bucket currently. Like we're trying to shift that. So it wasn't a real threat, but it was a thought I was having. So we had that meeting, and then an opportunity landed in our lap. And 2 weeks later, Holly and I had gone into business together and have landed now 2 gigantic tech clients that have taken Biddix meetings and has almost tripled our revenue and sales numbers, which is great. But I am suddenly, as of today, as we sit here, what is it, March 2nd, I am currently running 2 fully operating businesses as in a CEO role. And that was not the plan either. So everything just kind of continues to shock and amaze. Yeah.
And I know that, so you talk about, being able to compartmentalize and you are able to talk with a therapist, but I know for a fact too that you surround yourself with the types of people that you need to be able to do what you do on a regular
Catherine
basis.
is one of them. Yeah. Yeah. We really should just have wine while we're sitting here. No, I do. That definitely, one of the main lessons I took away from starting what was GBO was the need for a team. I had always been an individual player. I believed in team, but I had done Biddix meetings on my own for years at that point. Life necessitated that people help me build furniture and do news interviews for me while I was at the hospital. So that was kind of a start, but then I did spend a lot of time thinking I still could do everything. I started to kind of outsource social media, got an intern that kind of helped me with a little, some smaller things, got a accountant, but I still was reviewing every single thing. And I guess probably 6 or 8 months ago, I think was when I started realizing I was going to have a more defined team, but it all comes back to money. It just does. And I talk about money very openly as a business owner. I think among other things that I talk about very openly makes people uncomfortable. But if we aren't talking about it, then how is anybody ever going to learn? So I spent a couple months trying to figure out what the best way to do that was, both from a support standpoint and a financial standpoint. I did just bring on last month an online business manager, an OBM, who is helping me with processes basically for Biddix meetings, and then we're going to move to Aught, but we got to get BME under control first, and then a virtual assistant. And it's things like, for one of my clients, I do a lot of gift card purchasing. They send gift cards to their clients and I purchase them. So with 20 plus years of experience as a meeting planner, I'm then sitting down on a Starbucks or a Grubhub website and sending 50 individualized emails. That's not the best use of my time, right, as a business owner. So even being able to hand off that to the virtual assistant, to my VA, has been just a tremendous, it feels like magic. I'm like, can you do this? Yeah, done. Okay, cool. It's awesome. So I know everybody always told me I needed that. And it wasn't that I didn't believe them. I just couldn't figure out how to do it. But you ask enough of the right people, and eventually you get an answer that'll work for you. But then also, our members are just awesome. And those members and our friends of Aught, as I like to call those like Catherine, I really do. The other day I was like, oh, those are 3 of our members and 2 friends of Aught that are standing over at that table. Man, how does one make it without community in any space in life, but especially in entrepreneurship, right? So our members are constantly bringing me ideas on revenue streams, or, they're not coming to me saying, can we get this to make it better at the office for us? They're coming and saying, we think this is awesome, and here's how you could get more people to experience it, or here's how you could take away some of the revenue stress because here's another revenue stream idea. And so that community of women has just been awesome. I mean, honestly, our text messages are our text string is life-giving, right?
You could just write a book that's nothing but your text strings going back and forth. I feel like it would be daily affirmations that you could have.
Yeah, seriously, that's a good one.
And I think that's so I don't want to say it's totally unique, but I think it is extremely unique to the world of entrepreneurs serving entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
And the fact that when you are serving people that are so much like you, that it's so easy for them to understand and see exactly what you're going through, that it's not a typical client service provider relationship.
Right.
At
You don't have to
all.
give as much of the background. You know, like you can say something about, I don't know, bank account fees without even mentioning what that is, you know, giving a description, or the new PayPal fees or the new Venmo fees that are coming out. And there's just an immediate knowledge, like leveling, that is already there for that. What I do see, though, as new women come in. So one of the things that I'm so proud of for Aught is that we are in the conversation when new entrepreneurs or new women come into the city, or women from the city become entrepreneurs, that they may not be looking for office space, but I get an awful lot of phone calls of people saying, I heard I needed to call you. You know, that we're part of that conversation means a lot to me. And then I watch their faces as I'm having coffee with them, and they say something. I'm like, oh, I should introduce you to so-and-so. And I pull out my phone and I make that introduction. And, oh, you should follow this on Instagram. And then I get out my phone and and you can just see it in their eyes, like, wow, she's really doing those things. Whereas those of us that are farther into the game, journey, whatever you want to call it, it's not unusual. I would fully expect, if I said to somebody, hey, I'm looking for a new bookkeeper, that they would immediately give me, right? So I think that is a really solid example of the difference between being in or being out of entrepreneurship when you first come in. And ripple effect, I think I talked about it 87 times in our last interview, but that ripple effect is so real, because then I see those same women doing that at the next We event or the next Let Her Speak event or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes a part of just even though all of us are separately developing our own business cultures, we actually have a collective community culture that
100%.
that is the expectation of us under the corporation of women who are entrepreneurs, that that is how we operate. And I know that you've talked about how unique that seems to be for Knoxville in particular.
It really does. I feel like I have feet in so many different cities, just from life experience or my meetings business, et cetera. And I just think it's so supportive here. And not that it's terrible elsewhere. I just think the community here has been so gracious with each other, and with the multitude of resources that we have here, and the organizations that are already functioning, and a lack of competitiveness there, and the willingness to support each other. I mean, Tanika and I both own co-working spaces, and we both are constantly sharing each other's whatever, social or events or whatever, because in order for everyone to succeed, everybody has to support each other. Otherwise, it's just, eat the weak kind of situation. And what kind of fun is that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not fun.
It makes for a horrible culture.
Correct.
Any corporation you go to where it's the eat the weak, that is the most toxic cultures that you've ever walked into.
Yeah, and I do hope, as an individual, as a representative of my company, that, if somebody, like I did the first We meeting I walked into, I was like, I don't know a soul. And, networking is not my forte. I don't enjoy it. I have learned how to do it. I don't know that I'm still any good at it, but I finally have accepted it as a piece of life. But I would like to think that as those women walk in and I walk up and introduce myself, which, takes most people off guard, that they then leave, or anybody else, but that they leave thinking, wow, that was a very welcoming group of women. You don't want anybody to walk in and then leave and be like, not a soul talk to me, and they all suck.
And I think a lot of us have been in those
100%,
exact situations.
Which is why I suck at networking and don't like it. But the positive culture here, I think, is why I have been able to break out of that a little bit. Yeah.
So I know that we've talked about this question that I'm going to ask, and we have, I think, the group of us that surround Aught and surround the notion that women do need their own space. But I know we still continue to get questions about, why does it have to just
All
be women?
the time.
Yes.
Constantly. Why does it have to just be women? It doesn't have to be just women, but what is wrong with providing a space for that? That's my question. What is wrong with me providing a space where a woman is perfectly fine to say the word vagina and not blush? I mean, not that we're all walking around saying vagina all the time, but if you want to talk about your childbirth experience you just had, you don't need to look around and see, where you're at. And I think it's just, sorry, I said that word multiple times on here.
That's okay.
For anyone
this is
who doesn't want to hear
vagina
that
space.
Yeah, if anybody doesn't want to hear that word over and over again. There's just something to be said for sharing space with other folks who are going through the same experience that you're going through. And the experience of female entrepreneurship is a very specific experience.
I liken it to a lot of other specific, more niche affiliate types of groups. Like, I am not in any way a cyclist. So for me to be like, well, why are you only allowing cyclists in your cyclist group? And I go and join it. There's literally nothing I'm going to get out of it because I do not have the same mindset or the same passions or the same life experience as a cyclist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you put it in that perspective too, but also, I think people still continue to not fully understand the life experiences that most of us all go through, because we don't necessarily openly talk about it on a daily basis, because for the most part it's traumatic. And it's like we don't want to walk around talking about our trauma every day.
Well, and a lot of it
time.
too, I've done a lot of deep dive on this specifically over the pandemic, but again, that just happened to line up with my business story, right? On systemic issues and where people, when I say where, I just kind of mean like people collectively are coming from. And I don't know if it's my empathy. I don't know if it is the community that I am within, but really and truly, I feel very strongly that I cannot understand another person's point of view, that I can listen to it. I can have my understanding of their point of view, but that I've never lived their point of view. So I don't have any right to judge or be offended by how they are coming at a situation, because that POV is theirs and theirs alone, right? So there is a lot of that for women that is very much the same experience. That POV has been developed, especially those of us who've come from a corporate setting. That POV is very similar, what a lot of us have gone through. And there is something to be said for being in an office space where you want to shout that you just landed a huge contract worth, $500,000, which we do at Aught all the dang time. We have a bell that you actually ring, and then everybody's like, "What's up?" And you yell what the great thing is, right? Anytime I get a new lease signed, I hit the bell. I'm like, "New lease." And you're just very comfortable with it. You walk out, you just walk into somebody's office and be like, "Guess what just happened to me?" But because of the experiences we've had in a corporate world, I guarantee you, if there were men in that same space, we would not do that as openly and as freely. Because that is how we're trained in the corporate world, is to not do that. It's not saying any of us think that's right or wrong, but it is the experience that we're coming from.
Right. It's the somehow, some way, all of us had that kind of, I wouldn't say smack across the face, but of don't be too loud, don't be too boastful, don't talk too much about yourself. It's going to get taken the wrong way. Whether it was, a man or a woman who said that to us, or who was a mentor to us or something.
Absolutely. And I want to be very clear. I feel like I've said this sentence a lot this week. I am not anti-man. I love my husband. I have 2 sons. I think there are a lot of great men that have done a lot of great things. I just think that a lot of those men, great or not, have taken up so much of the air in the room that women have just learned how to live with the little bit that they were left. And it's time for us to start making those changes that allow for equal sharing of the air. And this is not a new idea. We are still, we were at the play the other night, the River and Rail play, and there is the very beginning of it. He one of the men pats his wife on the head and calls her like little lady, and literally the person next to me held me back. She's like, do not throw a punch. I was like, okay, I won't. But that is the same experience that we are now having in 2020 a lot of the time. You know, it doesn't help that I'm a relatively small person. I'm 5'2". I don't take up a lot of physical space. And the looks I get from a lot of older men when I mention that I own 2 companies are looks of shock and really disbelief a lot of the time.
Yep. Which I think if you were to say that to a lot of groups of men, they would be totally shocked and like, what are you talking about? And I think both you and I have such open conversations with our spouses about it, that like they totally see it. And but a lot of times it's so subtle that if you're not looking for it or you don't know what it looks like, it would just pass you by as nothing happened there.
Yeah.
But there are those looks and there are those little words that are used that bring it down a notch of almost shrinking in size your importance and what you did to some degree.
Yeah, and I think so. I'm a 2-3-3-2, kind of depending on the day. And as a meeting planner, how I always describe myself is Jennifer Lopez in The Wedding Planner, but for businesses, because that's about the only way I can get anybody to understand what a meeting planner actually does. But it's always been a behind the scenes gig for me. And Aught has required me to be way in front of the scenes. I am so tired of my face on the social, but the reality is the story of Aught is the story of entrepreneurship. And so people are invested, followers are invested in that, and people are drawn to our story from that. So I have to be out there and sharing my story. And what's been really great for me is to see Aught as her own person. So I can be very proud of Aught. And I can enjoy talking about Aught. And I can tell you how cool Aught is. So even that, I never was like that with BME. I still am not, now that I think about it. But the creation of that avatar for me has been so amazing, because the confidence with which I will sit down and talk to one person or 500 people about what Aught can do and what Aught has done is like not even a thing anymore, you know?
What does Aught look like as an avatar?
I've never thought about that.
Like, what does she look like?
I truly have no idea. So when I was little, I had a really bad lisp, and I went through a whole bunch of what's that called?
Yeah.
You know,
speech
like
therapy.
speech therapy.
I had a lisp too.
And I always wanted curly red hair, so I had an imaginary friend who had a lisp and curly red hair. But I don't know if that's who grew up to be Aught or not. That's a hard question, Catherine. I'm going to have to come back to you on that.
I was actually picturing Aught being a redhead.
Really?
I don't know why. Maybe it's because I have an affinity for redheads. But
well, you know what though, as we talk about this, now we're going to get back to the seriousness. I don't know that I want to give her what she looks like, because it's important to me that it doesn't matter. You know, that she can be for everyone what they need her to be.
She's a shapeshifter.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like I don't want to describe her and then somebody be like, yeah, that's not, she doesn't sound like anybody I want to be friends with, you know, because who she looks like for me is going to be different than who she looks like for somebody else. Just know she's really cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Envision the coolest person that you
and
know.
And she probably also really likes chocolate and coffee, but that's the only thing I'm going to say about her. But she'll drink tea with Catherine.
But she's a shapeshifter. Yeah. I think I could see that.
I think so.
Yeah.
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 And but I will tell you, she carries herself with a tremendous amount of courage and belief in herself. That is something I think about, is that all those things that I wish for women, I give her that character trait. You know,
she walks with a lot of power.
Yeah, she absolutely does.
She has like a Beyonce walk.
Yeah, like Sasha Fierce. That's kind of, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's not where I thought this was going, but I really like it. And now I'm going to be awake all night thinking about it. So
thinking about her. Well, you need something else to think about. So
why not?
You're welcome. So going back to, you've talked and you're very open. You're always open about the fact that Aught is a labor of love, and it's something that fills the bucket, but it doesn't necessarily fill the bank account right now, which I think is really important for people to understand that, a lot of times we make up our own stories about people that we see on the news and the media that we hear about on podcasts.
Yep.
And we decide, oh, this must be where they're at, when the reality is usually much different than that. And the fact that you're open about that is amazing. But because this fills your bucket so much, I mean, what have been, maybe 1-2 examples of moments where you weren't sure if it was filling your bucket anymore, and then something happened and you're like, no, this is why I'm doing this.
Yeah. So that actually happens like every day.
I figured.
So anytime that I feel like maybe it's not filling my bucket, it's not that it's not filling my bucket. Is this feeling worth it? The feeling of either stress or that it maybe will fail. Like, that's where those moments come in. But I live my life with like a daily goosebump check, and I don't look for them. They just happen. And they happen all the dang time. And it happens when, a woman at the office hires her second employee, when she joined us 18 months ago, she was just a solopreneur, and now she suddenly has 2 employees, or they land a big account, or I see the fruit of a relationship that was built because of Aught, not between 2 members, although we certainly have that, but watching one of our members serve another member of the Knoxville entrepreneur community that I introduced, or that somebody else, I shouldn't say but that somebody at Aught introduced, and seeing those connections. And the fact, the other day I actually thought I should draw what's it called, Catherine? You'll know the answer. The circles.
A network map?
A network map. My husband does
the thing
that
that
for
your
a living.
husband does?
Yeah. But I thought to myself, I really should draw that and just kind of start seeing how everybody connects, because Aught is a piece of that story in so much.
There's a platform that you can do that.
I know there is. And I'm married to someone who knows how to use it. But I mean, that would just be for jollies at that point, right? So like maybe if I get the flu, I'll do it when I'm sick. But just watching those relationships bloom, and watch then how they're able to affect other people. Those relationships are then affecting others too. It's just so neat to sit and watch. So anytime I realize I should give you a better example, but I can't think of one. Anytime I get down in the dumps, it doesn't last for very long,
Well, I think that's a good sign, though, that it's not for a week you're feeling this way. It's like for 5 minutes you're feeling this way.
Actually, here's a fun story. So what we have skipped over here is, after we renamed Aught, then we opened a second location and added a whole bunch of pillars of business, and just have like thrown her a party, and she's just, got somewhere to be every day. But we opened a second location here in downtown Knoxville, and we're in a Class A office building. So it's filled with other corporations and whatnot. And our office, the floor that we're on, the other businesses there have not really come back from the pandemic yet. Like, a lot of those spaces are still working remotely, but a few humans are there. So an older gentleman walked in the door a couple months ago, and Erin, who is our community manager down there, thought to herself, oh, we're about to get in trouble for being too loud. Again, back to the other story, the other story we just told. And he came in and he said that he had seen that we had a lactation consultant in the office, and his daughter had just given birth to his grandkid and was having a very difficult time with breastfeeding. And so he'd like to get the card of our lactation consultant member and purchase some services for his daughter.
That is such a cool dad.
Like, I just want to cry right now at the levels of coolness of that story.
Yeah.
Is that not amazing?
Oh my gosh.
And actually, how he found out was because the building manager, Brandon, who I think is like our number one fan, had told him that we had a lactation consultant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So it's just stuff like that just make every day. And I walk in and Patrick's like, what's the Aught story of the day? I'm like, let me tell you the fun thing that happened today, And while it doesn't fill the bank account, I am working very hard to grow what Aught is doing so that I can, it can become fiscally successful and allow me to kind of phase out of the first portion of my life, and stay here where I'm passionate about, but still pay the mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
like I need to. And it's a company that I built, really, I don't want to say for my kids, but with the anticipation that it would serve my kids for a long time, either educationally or financially, or how they see female entrepreneurs, how they, see what women can do. And with every day that passes, I see that more and more in them, that those are the lessons they're picking up. Mm-hmm. Actually, can I tell a funny story?
Sure.
So my littlest had to do a report on J.K. Rowling, and like a book report. He's in 3rd grade. And I do not think he understood the assignment in the least. So his description of her was J.K. Rowling was born in blah, 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 and she married blah, 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 and had a daughter. Then she got divorced, and she married blah, 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 and had a daughter and a son. And that was his description of J.K. Rowling. And I said, well, buddy, like, if nobody had ever heard of her before, ever, how would you describe her? You would say she wrote this series of books about magical kids, and they were the best-selling books of all time, and they got all these people to read. And he looks at me and he goes, does that sound more important than her kids? I was like,
Oh,
wow. I was like, that is pretty amazing, because a lot of what I do is, check myself on whether or not I am being a better mother, which was the whole reason I went into business for myself. I don't know that what he said means that that's happening, but it does mean that message of working women and family is, that they're picking up parts of it for sure. But yeah, I just know he's going to get a bad grade on that. And I want to send a note to his teacher and be like, but really, this is very sweet.
yeah. The intention is.
Yeah, the intention's there, but I realize academically, that's probably not what you were looking for.
Yeah. That's interesting. So since you did bring up, and we needed to get back to this though. So, after the rebranding and you had the launch and all of that, and it was really exciting. Why did you decide to open up a second location?
We decided to open a second location because it seemed viable, because we were full at our first location. And Knoxville geographically is like pretty big. So our location just wasn't a good one for everybody. They liked what we had, but it was just too far of a drive. So we looked at several different areas because we had requests from a lot of North Knoxville, Halls and Powell area. We also had a ton of requests for downtown. So we went into opening a second location, not knowing where we wanted to have it. It was more of a, how can we find something that meets what we need? My corporate real estate agent, commercial real estate agent, the brokers we would meet with, who, again, I don't mean to like say things about the men, but the looks we would get when we would walk into some of these, I just immediately was like, I will finish this tour, but we're done here, because, or when they asked what I did, what I was there for, and I told them, and they kind of just rolled their eyes. I was like, we're not doing that. And then we got to look at and they would also say, well, how many square feet? And Krista was always like, she just knows when she knows, because she just kept hearing me say, I just know when I walk in the space that it will be able to be configured in the way that we need it. So it's not about square footage. It's about how the space is laid out or whatever. And when we saw the downtown space, Class A building, it's a whole new ballgame. It overlooks the Sun Sphere, for goodness sakes. Like, you can't get any more iconic than that. And I went home very upset because it was perfect and I knew we could never afford it. But, Krista talked to the building, and the building believed in what we're doing as a mission. And they said, we're going to make it work. And I'll be danged if they didn't make it work. And I'm paying roughly the same price per square foot there as I'm paying at our West location, once you take into account utilities and whatnot. And that team over there, who is all male, could not have been more supportive or believe more in what we do. One funny thing is that we have two conference rooms. One of them is a very small room. We call it the Huddle Room, but we knew that there was going to be at least one member moving down who was having a baby. So we were like, it could work as a lactation room too. And to this day, all the men on that team still call it the lactation room. And we're always like, you just don't have to say it anymore. But they're saying it from a supportive standpoint, and I think it's just so cool to be able to have built a second location where there is then that additional community support with the building management too. So yeah, we second office was kind of we should do and the next thing I knew it was open. I mean, it was kind of like, I should open a co-working space for female, and then it was open. Same thing with the second
Well, I think part of it too is you said it out loud to your community of women around you.
Correct.
And the minute that you say something to the right group of people, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, and I say that to women who come in who maybe, we have members who are fully employed but have a side gig, who are fully employed and are looking for office space. And, we're here for that. Like, our mission is changing lives in local communities through female entrepreneurship. So if you in some capacity meet that mission, great. But they come in, they'll be like, I always thought it would be nice to have my own business. I'm like, listen, you can say it. Like, it's your choice. But I'm just telling you, as soon as you say it, there is a whole lot of women here who are going to make sure that happens. So you just think about what you want to say out loud first. If you don't want to be with a group of women who are going to help you accomplish goals that you are scared of, then you are in the wrong, the wrong place.
It is literally the place to speak it into existence.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how the second one happened. I said it and then it happened.
Yeah. And I know that you've been on a tumultuous journey of funding.
I don't know that I'd call it tumultuous. I'd call it non-occurring, but yeah. So it turns out when you start a business, nobody wants to give you money when you very first have started it, regardless of if you have a successful other business. So we started the first one with a credit card from my bank where I've been a member since I was 16. So I think that's how I got that. I have no idea. So we started that with that credit card. And then when we decided to open the second office, I really thought that we would have some funding secured. Long term, we've got forecasts that show profit, and not even that long term, like 18 months. But it was that 6-month lag of where you still have to pay for things, like it's a $4,000 deposit to even rent the space. And then, it's, $5,000 a month before you even have a single member in there. And you have to buy the couches and the debt, it's a financial outlay from the beginning. But we had 6 months between the time we signed the contract and we actually had to start paying for the second location. And I for sure believed that we were going to find funding in that 6 months. We did not find funding in that 6 months. And it was, I signed that contract, that lease, and it's worth almost $250,000, like just shy of $250,000 over the course of 5 years. I'm going to cuss now. I was like, holy shit. But I didn't figure that number out till after I signed it. It's fine. I've been looking at everything on a monthly and annual basis.
That makes it a bit more palpable.
So, but the reality is I, had signed my name on the dotted line and I had to find the money. It would be lovely if we were independently wealthy. We're not. My father bought me some stock when I was born that had matured nicely. And I just never had any plans to do anything with it. My brother and sister, I think, used it to buy cars, when they were teenagers. I just hadn't touched mine. And so that's what's been funding it, is selling off some of that stock, with the intent, which again, I want to be very clear. We're talking like less than $20,000 of stock here. I'm not talking about, like a couple $100,000. But my intent is to purchase that stock back. I don't, I think he would be happy that I was using it for the business. But at the same time, I do kind of want to be able to replenish that.
Yeah, you treat it as like a loan to yourself. Yeah.
So but that's where we're at.
Yeah. So if anybody listening
wants to give us money.
Yeah.
For real. So we have a member who is, who, kind of, she does this. She helps raise funds as a part of her portfolio of offerings. And we've talked about it. I don't want to sell off part of the business because I want to be able to pass it on, or, have it for my kids. Again, my dad had a business from well before I was born that is still in the family. So that's kind of my background on that. So I don't want to just like, loosey-goosey kind of sell off pieces to raise funds. What I would love is a private investor who believes in what we're doing, and is willing to give us some funding to help us with that growth, that will then result, in profit back for them. This is not an area that I know much about. Thank goodness for the member that we have who's able to explain it to me, in terminology that makes sense, and for other people in the Knoxville community who continue to, kind of show me options that may be out there. Every door we've knocked on thus far has stayed closed, but I truly believe that the more that we tell our story, the better chance that it'll reach the right person. And that, if it doesn't, what we've got is working, and it can work, as long as it needs to. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think but it's an important story for people to realize too, because you hear stories all the time of so-and-so got funding and they raised and all of that, but it's really not as easy and simple. And you can't just say, hey, I'm looking for money, and 1 million people will come to you and be like, please take my money.
Well, and I do think too, when you hear the word funding, you're thinking I think most people, when they hear funding, are thinking lots of zeros, right? Like, we're looking for $50,000. That's all. $50,000 would allow us to breathe easier, making sure that the rent is paid every month. And it would allow us to invest in some things that as we grow, we now know that we need. So we need a software package, a co-working software package. That's an expensive thing to purchase. And we're just fine with what we're using. But as we grow, that's not true. We have mostly been fine with what we're using, but we have gotten to outgrowth of it. We can still manage it with it, but it's just not the best option. So if we had funding for that, that would not only make my life easier, but it would make, our members' experience better. It would allow for easier growth moving on, et cetera. So I think that's the other thing too, is just when you say funding, that some people may just need, their funding may be $500 or $10,000. So
yeah. And there's the study that we did about the access to capital, Richard did, showed that the majority of business owners usually just need a little bit of funding, but that little bit can make such a huge difference.
Huge. I mean, on my BME side, we were lucky enough to get SBA funding with the pandemic that came through, and the funding that we were able to get there allowed us to sustain until, business picked back up. But even with business having picked up now, that money has allowed us kind of a bridge for cash flow purposes, for bringing in additional assistance, as we're making those things happen. As a business that started, only 4 months pre-pandemic, we were not eligible for that. We tried every avenue and got a no, on all of the government funding. However, we do still have a reconsideration in, and every day I just pray. So, so I think, the takeaway for everybody on this should be, wow, if I want to talk about money and business, I should sit down with Erika, because she'll talk truth. About it.
And it's all about the relationships too. It's not just taking money from anybody who offers it up too, because I would imagine if it was the wrong relationship for you, you would turn that down.
Yeah,
100%.
I 100% would. Yeah. I honestly, for me, the only requirement is that it's somebody that believes in what we're doing. That's the extent of it, and that they're not in it to make a quick buck, that they're in it as an investment and a belief in what our mission is.
Yep. So my last question, which is something that I always ask on the podcast, and I love to see how it changes and evolves over time. But at this point of where you are now and everything that you've been through, what do you see the legacy of what you're leaving behind to be at this point?
Yeah, the last time I answered that question, the answer was kindness. Like, at my funeral, all I want is everybody to be like, she was just really kind, and she really raised kind kids. Like, that's the extent of it. And personally, that answer hasn't changed. It's the exact same answer. Now, having seen what Aught can accomplish, what I want her legacy to be is one of support of the idea of female entrepreneurship. And I say support as a single word because, you want a short answer. But what I mean by that is helping other women to believe in their ability and their ideas and make them a reality.
Yeah. The culmination of literally #women supporting women.
Correct.
Yes. So for anybody who loves what you're doing, has loved everything that you said, where should they find you? Where should they follow the journey?
Always on the socials. So our social is Aught Entrepreneurs. So it's AUGHT and then entrepreneurs. You can look that up if you need to. Our website is the same, aughentrepreneurs.com. And we've got a link on there for booking a call or a tour. But that is not meant just for people who maybe are interested in being members. If you're just interested in seeing what we're doing or want to have a conversation with me about one of the things we talked about on the podcast, that link is your place to get that scheduled. And it's always fun for me when I get a little email that somebody has scheduled whatever it is that they've scheduled on there. So we'd love to show you guys around.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Erika.
Oh, thank you, Catherine, for being
getting us up to date.
Well, I'm going to cut you off and I'm going to say thank you because I know the word ought comes out of your mouth daily. I have no doubt. And the support that you offer as a representative of KEC and what you do with Let Her Speak and just in general being a good human has really been great for me personally and for the business.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I am so glad that I randomly emailed you one day and was hey, we need to meet.
So the other day I was like, do you remember how we met? You literally just said, I want to meet you. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm talking to this woman about, but sure, come on up to my half-built office.
That's how it's done.
I know. And now I've got a heck of a text string going. So.
Well, thank you. I am so glad that you accepted my random invitation of insistence that we have to know each other.
Me too. Thanks, everybody.
This episode of She Speaks is brought to you by our amazing partners at First Horizon Bank. She Speaks is produced, edited, and scored by the very talented Travis Tench at Oak Hill Audio. If you loved the episode you just heard and want to support Let Her Speak's mission of elevating real women's stories, don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share at Let Her Speak USA. Together, we will make our voices heard.